Coming up in today's newscast, the United States ramps up sanctions against Iran. British police begin investigations into antisemitism within the UK Labour Party. And Israeli Eurovision star Netta Barzilai returns to Europe with a new and empowering message. During a press conference in Bulgaria on Friday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu finally broke his silence regarding the murder of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. Netanyahu was quoted saying that, quote, "What happened in the Istanbul consulate was horrendous and it should be duly dealt with. Yet at this time, it's very important that Saudi Arabia remains stable," end quote. Jamal Khashoggi is suspected to have been murdered by Saudi agents after he entered the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. And while his case has made waves across the whole world, it's not surprising that this is Netanyahu's reaction. Israel and Saudi Arabia do not have diplomatic relations publicly, but they do share intelligence on their mutual enemies, particularly Iran. Netanyahu is hoping for Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman to eventually recognize Israel publicly in the Arab world too. That's in part why the Israeli premier shifted the focus back to Iran during his comments, saying, quote, "We have to make sure Iran does not continue the malign activities," continuing that, "Blocking Iran is uttermost on our agenda for security, not merely for Israel, but I believe for Europe and the world as well," end quote. Speaking of Iran, the United States is now gearing up to impose its second set of harsh sanctions against the hardline Islamic regime since the United States dropped out of the Iranian JCPOA nuclear deal last May. This time, the Trump administration will be more specifically targeting the Iranian oil industry, whereas the first sanctions, among other things, took aim at the Iranian automotive sector and financial transactions relating to U.S. dollars. Trump has insisted that these sanctions are not intended to bring the Ayatollah regime down, but are rather just to force it to end its destabilizing and hegemonic behaviors in the region. Iran's economy has already taken major hits in the wake of these sanctions, falling into a major recession this year and with further drops expected. The Iranian currency plunged over 70% in just a year as well. Washington announced that there would be some exceptions to the renewed rule, allowing Tehran to export oil to select nations even after the sanctions resume. But those countries haven't yet been revealed. And anyway, it's not enough to save the struggling Iranian economy. Iranian Supreme Leader Khamenei criticized Trump, saying that the world opposes every move he makes. But meanwhile, Saudi Arabia is practically getting a pass on the Khashoggi murders simply because the Saudis oppose Iran. And Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, for one, already praised the decision as something that should have happened long ago. He said, quote, "For years I've called for fully renewing sanctions against Iran's murderous terror regime that endangers the entire world. The effect of the initial sanctions is already being felt," end quote. Netanyahu ended with, quote, "Thank you, President Trump, for this historic action. Sanctions are indeed coming," end quote. But Iran remains defiant, if not out of spite, then out of political reasons. But President Rouhani has already acknowledged that the country is hurting, yet, quote, "We cannot tell our people that because of America's pressure, we can't do anything. This answer is not acceptable," end quote. Returning now to the studio with more on the increased United States sanctions against Iran is Dr. Mordechai Kedar, expert on the Middle East from the Begin Sadat Center at Bar-Ilan University. Dr. Kedar, thank you so much for being with us again.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so let's start with, how might the renewed sanctions, the increased sanctions, change the landscape politically here in the Middle East? Are any alliances seemingly going to change? Are people going to, drop Iran under these new sanctions, or are they going to buckle down and dig their heels in?
Well, this is one thing. Of course, now it will be much harder for countries to cooperate economically with Iran, and we do see how countries like India and others, even China, tries to reduce the scale of economic cooperation with Iran, which inflicts very big harm on the Iranian economy. Mm-hmm. However, what we very clearly could see already is, first of all, Iranian oppositions from abroad actually start feeling that this is the time for them to start being active. They are sitting, I know about all kinds of negotiations and meetings and all kinds of documents which go from side to side, because these oppositions feel that this time the Iranian regime will not survive. If the Americans will insist on having those sanctions tightened on Iran, and believe me, those people, Iranians, expats, who live in many countries in the world, if they feel that something here is different from everything which was like in the 30-something years since the Ayatollahs came to power, I think that this is a very important indication for something which we as Westerners do not always feel. This is one thing. Second thing, inside Iran, what we saw since last December, when Trump started to talk about sanctions and renewing sanctions,
sure.
They feel also that the pressure which will be maintained on the regime will be in such a magnitude that the regime will not survive as a regime. Never mind the JCPOA. The regime itself, people will give up, from the regime and will run away. And this is what people feel.
So what kind of really should we be preparing for? Should we be preparing for the fall of the Ayatollah regime in the near future? And how would that ripple?
Well, near future is, relative.
Sure.
What is near? 1 year, 2 years. And don't forget...
I'd say either is pretty near.
And don't forget that we are now approaching the midterm elections in the United States. What will be after Tuesday, nobody knows. Will the president continue to be, with a Congress and a Senate with him, or will he be a lame duck after the elections when one or two of these houses will...
He's completely democratic.
Okay,
yeah.
so this is another question. But what happens around Iran, that definitely states like Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, start feeling also that Iran is shaking. And the regime might definitely collapse. What they will do if they collapse, I have no idea. They might, let's say, take everybody to hell by launching missiles all over the Middle East, or not.
Well,
but the IDF is already on alert.
Yeah, we're definitely going to have to be looking very closely into this. Dr. Kedar, I hope you come back with more insights when more insights are to be had. Thank you so much for coming in. Hamas and Israel are reportedly closer than ever to a ceasefire agreement today, as the Hezbollah-affiliated newspaper Al-Akbar in Lebanon published a preliminary look at the alleged deal, and in it, 10 provisions are spelled out, each of which creates the conditions for the clauses that follow. And though neither side has signed anything, the drastic easing of tensions along the Gaza border this weekend does show major progress. There were no fires started by incendiary kites and balloons. The protests along the border were only hundreds and not thousands strong, and only tear gas was necessary at times to quell the rioting. The 10 provisions published by Al-Akbar describe a calm border where Hamas punishes anyone violating the riot cessation order. Thus, the March of Return protests will also end by the end of the year, and the flotillas will also be stopped. The calm between Israel and Gaza will then be held for at least 3 years, with UN and Russian supervision. In return, 70% of Egypt's blockade will be lifted by the end of the year. Several Gaza border crossings will open permanently for goods and aid. The Gaza fishing zone will be expanded. Projects to expand work further in the Strip will be initiated, and upwards of 5,000 young Gaza Palestinians will be granted work permits for employ in Israel, provided the PA resumes paying 80% of Gaza government employees' salaries and agrees to allow Qatar to finance the rest. Finally, there will also be a prisoner exchange deal negotiated through Egypt. Egyptian President Sisi reportedly met with PA President Abbas on the same day the report was released in alleged efforts to promote the agreement and get Abbas on board. The two also discussed cooperation between Palestine and Egypt. It's now been a week since the massacre at the Tree of Life synagogue on Squirrel Hill, Pittsburgh, and the toll it has taken, especially on the Jewish community, but indeed on all faiths around the country, is still being felt. LTV correspondent Yael Shir is here with the update. Yeah.
Yeah, just a week after the worst anti-Semitic hate crime in U.S. history, Jewish worshippers in Pittsburgh attended the Shabbat services at the Beth Shalom Synagogue this past weekend. After observing a moment of silence for the victims, Rabbi Jeffrey Myers, who actually placed the 911 call during the synagogue massacre, gave a very emotional sermon. He referenced the backlash from the community during President Trump's visit as well. He stated, quote, "For those who rejected that President Trump came, I will not let anyone tell me how to welcome a guest in my house. As a Jew and as a religious leader, you show respect and welcome. That is why I welcomed President Trump." Anyway, apparently he's received hate mail after welcoming the president. He expressed that he doesn't blame President Trump or any one person for what happened.
All right, so then after this tragedy, how are people gearing up to protect themselves in case of future attacks?
Well, there are a lot of plans being implemented to protect against another hate crime. A lot of synagogues are rethinking their security measures. They're planning to put armed security guards in the synagogues. Actually, in Manhattan, armed security is already fairly common in synagogues, yet some people are opposed to this. They believe that having a security guard there is going to take away from the feeling of worship in their synagogue.
So after this tragedy, how are people gearing up to protect themselves in case of future attacks?
Well, there are a lot of plans being implemented to protect against another hate crime. A lot of synagogues are rethinking their security measures. They're planning to put armed security guards in the synagogues. Actually, in Manhattan, armed security is already fairly common in the synagogues. Yet others are opposed to this, saying they don't want to feel they have to be around guns in houses of worship.
So then are there any other strategies besides security guards that are kind of being floated here?
Yeah, there are some interesting new ideas. Actually, one person has done something quite unique in trying to help others prevent another massacre from happening. A Jewish gun owner in Colorado, Mel Bernstein, has offered to give rabbis free semi-automatic rifles to help protect their congregants in case of an attack.
So any rabbi can just get a free rifle?
Well, not exactly. The rabbis have to pass an intensive background check first.
Okay, so, I mean, that's not terribly outlandish. I mean, it really doesn't preclude them from getting a rifle in the first place. But can you tell me a little bit more about Mr. Bernstein's, rifles for rabbi offer?
Yeah, so there are very mixed reactions from rabbis in the community, understandably so. Rabbi Jeff Adder in Colorado Springs said that the offer was generous and thoughtful, but rabbis would need to get proper training first, which isn't a bad idea since the only device most rabbis know how to use is a shofar. But others had less positive reactions. Scott Levin, the regional director of the Anti-Defamation League in Colorado, said that rabbis carrying guns would be a disruption to services at a synagogue. And he prefers the security guard route and panic buttons being installed in the synagogues. And yet others reject the idea of armed guards or any guns completely, saying that shootings like this are representative of the political climate in the country.
All right, well, that may very well be the case, that our culture has to go through some radical changes or evolution here, but, and again, especially with respect to gun violence. But again, that's certainly an argument that can be had while in the meantime you have to protect yourself and sometimes others from danger. So it sounds like there are some new ideas that are being put on the table that may do some good. I think it's worth it, at least for each congregation and each rabbi individually, to look at this decision for themselves. Hopefully some of these ideas will help prevent a similar tragedy in the future. Yael, thank you for coming in.
Thanks, Aaron.
After months and months of accusations, British police have now announced to the BBC that they have opened an investigation into allegations of criminal anti-Semitism within the UK Labour Party. Police reiterate that the party itself is not under investigation, though many individuals within the party are. The investigation follows the leaking of an internal Labour Party memo detailing at least 45 cases of social media posts and messages made by Labour Party members, posts that Jewish Labour MP Margaret Hodge said the party should have taken to the police on their own a long time ago. London's LBC Radio received the alleged Labour Party document in September and then submitted it to Metro Police Chief Commissioner Cressida Dick, who said police will investigate now as it appears, quote, there may have been a crime committed, end quote. Chishti saw the material as well and said that at least 17 of the 45 detailed instances should be under investigation, while at least another 4 are potential racial hate crimes. Tom Watson, the deputy head of the UK Labour Party, said he wasn't surprised by the reports and that the full force of the law should be applied to whomever may have broken the law. But unfortunately, Watson also predicts that this investigation may in fact impede the effort to rid Labour of anti-Semitism entirely. He said, quote, if this does one thing, it will silence a small number of people who still believe that anti-Semitism doesn't exist in my party or other parties, and that hampers the campaign to try and deal with this problem as quickly and as swiftly and as forcefully as we can, end quote. But as this report comes after one scandal following the next, many others believe that this may still lead to the wake-up call that's necessary to exact change. In spite of heavy demonstrations and a practically split parliament, the Israeli Knesset last Wednesday rejected the preliminary reading of a bill that would include same-sex couples in existing surrogacy laws. The draft legislation was a combination of 2 proposals put forth by Zionist Union MK Itzik Shmuli and Yesh Atid's Yael German, and it lost its preliminary reading in a vote of 41 to 49. In July, the Knesset extended surrogacy eligibility, but only to single women and not to men. The new proposal would have allowed single men and gay couples then to solicit the services of surrogate mothers, whereas currently only single women and heterosexual couples incapable of conceiving are allowed. Other changes in the latest proposal reportedly include expansions on who can become a surrogate mother, as well as who can procure donated eggs and from where. MK Itzik Shmuli, who is openly gay, explained that the right to a family is a basic one that is central to our existence and our nature. Yet, quote, for more than 20 years, it's been denied to an entire community, my community, end quote. He then asked Netanyahu to look him in the eye and explain to him that he has no right to be a father. Netanyahu responded on the subject, however, saying that he has no problem with him being a father, but that it's not only up to him. He said, quote, I heard the stories of gay couples and men about their desires to have kids and form families. I support it, but at this moment, I have no majority in the coalition to pass it. When I have the majority, I'll pass the bill, end quote. But with little to no evidence to suggest a shakeup in the coalition, it doesn't look like Netanyahu will get the majority he's looking for anytime soon. The practice of a polygamous marriage became criminalized in Israel in 1977 and is punishable by up to 5 years in prison. But for Bedouin communities, the law simply has not been enforced. In fact, it's not even a secret that one Arab-Israeli Knesset member from the Joint Arab List, Taleb Abu Arar, is now married to 2 women at the same time. Well, now Israel wants Bedouin women to strive for equality and to end polygamy within their communities. And ILTV's correspondent, Doriel Mizrahi, is here with more about it. Doriel?
Hey, literally decades after being accused of turning a blind eye, Israeli authorities are finally beginning to take polygamy in the Bedouin society seriously. And as of now, 15 indictments have already been issued against alleged offenders.
Why did the state avoid dealing with this up until now, though?
Well, it's been difficult to enforce this law because Bedouins are traditional society and for decades have carried on with their lives without any outside intervention, and for them it's somewhat a religious custom. I'm assuming the state avoided dealing with this because it felt that it shouldn't be treading on very intimate grounds. Also, not all Bedouin marriages are logged in official databases anyway, but recent government figures estimate that roughly 20% of all Bedouin families are polygamous.
So again, though, why enforce this now? Where was this policy before?
Well, this past July, the government published a 315-page report recommending tougher law enforcement on the matter, and it pertains mostly to education, encouraging higher women employment rates, better treatment, welfare, and health for these women. So just last month, Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked convened a meeting that revealed hundreds of reports already filed regarding men involved in polygamous marriages and police reports stating they should be barred from working in the civil service and education systems. That being said, the recommendation still suggests that Sharia courts in Israel continue registering polygamous unions, just under more strict limitations.
So then my next question is this. How did this effort to eradicate polygamy start? Who's pushing the initiative?
Okay, so Abu Sharib is the first female attorney in the Bedouin community, and she, along with many other activists, have spoken out against this controversial practice. She basically said that she began addressing the issue after seeing how harmful polygamy was to women, children, and the society as a whole. There's a big criticism toward the government as well amongst Bedouin women because Israel is a democratic country and it is illegal, yet they still haven't found a way to eradicate this practice. So hopefully this time around the solution will help women from these unwanted marriages.
All right, well, for the women's sakes, I hope so too. Thank you very much, Julia.
Thanks for having me.
All right, in other news, today marks the 23rd anniversary of the death of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Thousands gathered in Tel Aviv's Rabin Square over the weekend to commemorate his death, and the event was organized by the Darkenu movement and the National Union of Israeli Students. One of the organizers at Darkenu said that the goal of the event was to allow everyone to find his place and to take down the political divide that separates people. But regardless, the event quickly turned from commemorative to political in nature. The audience demanded that Minister of Regional Cooperation Tzachi Hanegbi, who spoke at the weekend event, apologize for a 1995 rally against the Oslo Accords, which took place in Jerusalem a month before Rabin's murder and featured speeches from heads of the right-wing leadership. It was at that rally when the participants rioted to cancel the Oslo Accords, the same reasoning that drove Rabin's assassin Yigal Amir. Though Jewish Home Party head Naftali Bennett responded to the criticism against Hanegbi, saying the boos and demands against him were, quote, a shameful leftist demonstration, end quote. He added that the right didn't murder Rabin, Yigal Amir did. But then in related news, a recent poll shows that only 60% of Israelis actually think Yigal Amir is guilty of the assassination. This despite Amir killing Rabin at point blank and in front of hundreds of witnesses and cameras. Of the 4 choices given in the poll, 60% said Amir was the murderer, 7% said he was not the murderer, 13% said a different conspiracy theory, and 20% said they didn't know. This is evidence that perhaps the history books in Israel aren't doing nearly a good enough job. But at any rate, the demonstration over the weekend still went on relatively without a hitch. Israeli musician Aviv Geffen performed at the event as he did at the same rally in which Rabin was killed 23 years ago. And several other bands also took the stage, including Ethnics, Dana International, and Masada Yemin. Now, who hasn't heard the song Toy that won the 2018 Eurovision Song Contest? Well, ever since the competition's end, Israel's winner, Netta Barzilai, has been preparing for this very day. Barzilai is now heading to Europe for her first Euro World Tour, and ILTV's Emmanuel Kadosh has all the details.
Thanks, Aaron. Well, we here at ILTV, and I know you are huge fans of Netta's. I personally love the song Toy and everything it represents, especially, the fact that it was inspired by the Me Too movement. And we're even more excited to see, hopefully if we get tickets, Netta performing in Tel Aviv for Eurovision 2019. But before we jump to that, Netta is now on her first European tour, and she's armed with a message of empowerment after overcoming her own self-doubts that she's willing and eager to share with the world, and more specifically Europe right now.
Yeah, I think that she really represents a wholly different type of celebrity for a lot of people all over the world. And her song was meant to be empowering, and she's here to show people that you can be different and still succeed.
Yes.
And now she just has a platform to make a difference.
Exactly.
Nice.
It's been said that her song Toy became an anthem for others who have been, bullied or made feel like some sort of outcast for any reason. Similar to Netta, she has always been open and honest and has spoken about her childhood and how she had to be, how she was teased over her body. She said in an interview on Saturday, quote, "We're made to feel small in all kinds of situations, and I don't want to feel small anymore." She went on to say that she's looking to empower, to love, to be empowered, and to empower others because she feels, quote, "When we send out good energy, it comes back at us and makes the world a better place," which you can't disagree with.
It's good karma. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't be more proud too that this is a message being sent from someone, one of our very own, and someone who didn't even plan on having this platform, from what I understand.
Not at all. I actually didn't know this before watching the reality show Kochab Haba, which is the Israeli singing show that the winner is sent to represent Israel in the Eurovision. But Netta originally didn't think she would ever win. She expected to get more local exposure and maybe, a few more gigs here and there. She actually knew nothing about the Eurovision Song Contest before applying for this show, which is shocking, but also amazing.
Well, it's amazing how things work out, and that she didn't even expect to win. That's kind of crazy. But I guess, the less you expect sometimes, the more you're surprised with the unexpected opportunities that arise from what you do. So, but tell me, on a side note now, what does Netta have to say about the call for artists to boycott next year's Eurovision in Tel Aviv due to the Israel-Palestinian conflict?
Well, Netta, being Netta, she's here to spread love. During her interview, she said, quote, "Instead of boycotting, we should think how we can help, how to improve the situation. Tell me where to sing to solve the world's problems, and I'll go." If only it were that simple, then everyone would be singing and solving problems.
If only.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's hope everyone is planning, who is planning on boycotting realizes that there's no positive outcome for either side if that happens. And instead of boycotting, let's try to find a way for peace and for everyone to be happy.
Yes.
Thanks for the update, Emmanuel.
Thank you.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. The Knesset has unfortunately recently rejected a bill granting surrogacy rights to single and gay men. But that doesn't mean that we can't learn how to describe this breaking story in Hebrew. So today's word is pondekaut, or surrogacy. Surrogacy, or pondekaut, is when a woman becomes pregnant with the purpose of carrying the fetus to term for another woman or man to parent. This woman would be the pondekait, or the surrogate mother. And now most states in the United States allow surrogacy, or pondekaut, and so do many other countries, including the United Kingdom, Ireland, Denmark, and Belgium. And so thanks to this wonderful service, just about anyone can start a family, and that's just the best. Let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be partly cloudy and cool with temperatures of around 61 or 16 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow you can expect a chance of showers and a rise in temperatures to a high of about 74 or 23 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.70 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook at Israel English News and on Twitter at ILTV News. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you for watching.